Final exam. At Lanier College, they have the finest security. The best teacher-student relations. No fraternity hazing. Strictly enforced curfews.
What was that?
And a killer. Final exam.
Salutations all, this is Juiciest Slice, here to discuss something concerning an old slasher movie that's really neither here nor there. Have no illusions about that.
I apologize for nothing!
But that I find worthy of sharing nonetheless because
some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
So an enormous thanks for checking out this little amusement. I deeply appreciate it. The early 1980s saw a spectacular boom of slashers that somehow was sustained throughout the entire decade. With a fleet of intriguing villains up to all kinds of gory, violent, and sinister shenanigans. From Jason Voorhees to Michael Myers, Cropsey to Madman Mars, Pamela Voorhees to Angela Baker, and Freddy Krueger to Chucky the Killer Doll. Some wore masks, and others showed their ugly or not so ugly mugs.
We're very short-handed.
Some could talk and spout one-liners or bon mots.
Finger licking good. Presto. You're dead.
Say no to drugs.
I guess I just got a little carried away.
She's even more refined than her mother.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV.
And others did their talking purely with their actions. Some were women who were angry and vengeful and mentally unstable.
She was so young. I can't! Let go of me! Like you will be other. Surprised? Jason was my son, and today is his birthday.
Some worked in tandem in something more akin to a team dynamic.
What the hell's the matter with you?
Peel that pig and slice him thick. That's my sweet meat. Hogs on the grill.
Some were, I'll say, confused, and not very representative of transsexuals. But since gender dysphoria made a good twist, here you go.
I'm not Katie.
What are you doing? We have to clean our home. Make it nice again. How can it be?
God, she's a boy.
What did most of the Slayers in these films have in common? They were colorful characters with fleshed out backstories with dastardly, oftentimes strange and off-kilter, but mostly comprehensible motives. But some who tried their hand at the subgenre attempted to differentiate their product by going with a different tact, expounding on the more mysterious and presenting a killer who neither speaks nor offers any insight into their motives, which can work to great effect.
Well, I'm sincerely glad to hear that, for all our sakes.
Though a fine diversion if you're predisposed to slashers, 1981's Final Exam isn't likely to top anyone's favorite list, But it did come out of the slasher golden age in the immediate aftermath of the unprecedented successes of Halloween and Friday the 13th. And it put forward a killer that may have been distinct, but more through bearing and action than affectation and unique weaponry. Ultimately, a tall, dark, deadly, and silent cipher more compelling for his mysteriousness. He's a brutal beast of a man on a rampage for apparently no discernible reason. In fact, he seems to target his victims totally at random, going after college students for a reason known only to him. We never learn his name. The only hint we get of his identity comes from his brief appearances on screen, since in those he's stalking on the periphery or committing murder, all we really know for sure is he's maybe angry and experiencing some kind of emotional upheaval that drives him to brutally snuff out life. I think his look, though simple and rather undistinguished, is more terrifying than some of your more monstrous brand of slashers. As played by martial artist, fight choreographer, and stuntman extraordinaire Timothy L. Rayner, he's a rough-and-tumble bruiser if there ever was one, a man who can obviously handle himself and commit violence at will. Basically, he looks capable because he is capable. The film's opening kills go down at March College. A pair of unfortunates unceremoniously sent to the angels, but Lanier College is the main setting. A place where the student body,
Speaking of morons,
doesn't necessarily come off as the best,
I only know about half of it, and that's the easy half.
nor brightest,
I hate history anyway. It's so boring.
and some are obvious douchebags,
No offense.
with antimatter where gray matter should reside in their skulls.
Hey, this ain't the test I've been studying.
The professors think they're funny too,
I'll be seeing many of you back here next semester in remedial chemistry.
and they're skeevy besides.
Then why don't you leave?
Because I love the sweet young girls that throw themselves at me.
The coach, played by Gary Rushing, a famous bootlegger, is a hoot.
When I get so old and ornery I can't hit nothing except with a scattergun, I give you a call.
Our final girl is the lovely Courtney. Your average college student out to get an education while she tempers herself with experiences. What distinguishes her might come down to her feelings of being something of an outsider as a hard worker with average means, unwilling to use her feminine wiles to get ahead, meaning college is hard because she has to do her work. She isn't your typical sorority girl type. In fact, looks down at all the hazing and whatnot, and even has the introspection and self-awareness to realize a lot of her jealousies and concerns don't become her.
I sound like a silly girl, don't I?
Radish is on her side.
Don't sound silly to me.
He's our secondary main character, the spiritual forerunner of Randy in Scream, a nerdy guy cursed by smarts,
I can't help it. I'm brilliant.
a penchant for coming off like the boy who cried wolf,
I know I thought the other one was real, but this is different. There's a dead body right here.
and paranoia.
When are you going to realize that the whole world isn't made of psychopaths skulking about?
But they are out there. They do exist.
That proves completely justifiable when the murder spree he feared comes to fruition.
People are killed every day for no reason at all.
And even he, likely a virgin if there ever was one, isn't rewarded for his foreknowledge or soothsaying. The real standout in this is the rude, crude Droog, one wild man.
Offensive.
Because he's a top football player, this oaf gets away with some awful behavior. When I first saw this film, I had a feeling Wildman was being set up for a smackdown with the killer, because if not laying the groundwork for a comeuppance, why make him so insufferable?
I got better things to do.
In that I wasn't disappointed. Still, I personally find his sophomoric over-the-top shenanigans amusing if distracting.
Conference time.
I know this film was intended to be scary, but his overstated antics,
Now I have to kill you. Wild man, You shouldn't perpetrate a crime unless you've considered all the consequences. Oh, don't feel bad. So many great crimes are ruined by tiny slip-up.
Approaching the range of caricature,
I'm talking about cold, clammy, maggot-infested dirt.
often transform this into a comedy. He's such an obnoxious buffoon.
Hey, that's enough, Wildman. Come on. Oh, come on. Let's go.
You know it's building up to a confrontation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we could get him.
I need to mention a bizarre flourish that dates this movie in a big way. I'm going to try and explain it in a way that even with modern sensibilities it doesn't sound completely stupid, dumb, or dim-witted.
Good luck.
Who am I trying to kid? Anyways, the rowdy frat boys, up to shenanigans as always, go ahead and stage what appears to be an active school shooting, and go to great lengths to sell it, all as a diversionary tactic to pass a test, an act that would doubtlessly draw a peck of trouble today. The whole thing is treated like a lark, a prank, and Radish is put in his place for daring to call law enforcement.
These type of murders happen all the time.
Oh, they happen. But not in my county, and not on my supper time.
I guess back in the day they never considered that school and other public shootings could become so prevalent. Attempting such a hoax would probably result in at the very least arrest, the third degree, fines, expulsion, and maybe even time behind bars, and at worst repeated taserings or even death via hail of bullets. I mention all this because it speaks to the atmosphere of this particular campus, the sort of dunderheaded shenanigans that go on.
I swear to God, I'll pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans.
Hey, Farva, what's the name of that restaurant you like with all the goofy shit on the walls and the mozzarella sticks? You mean Shenanigans?
It's the kind of place that in a slasher film screams for reformation meted out by your garden variety lunatic on a rampage. Since the film was specifically designed to ape all the elements that had emerged to comprise the slasher paradigm, the so-called plot proceeds, and then there were none style, as the nameless killer arrives on campus in his creeper van.
Boy, they sure did fool me. I should have known it was a fraternity prank.
To stalk co-eds. And the campus in general.
It wasn't so bad after all.
Before proceeding to lower the population one body at a time in brutal and visceral fashion. He proves fearless, a total badass, unafraid to throw down with a muscle-bound football freak and wild man. And proves crazy wins over youth brawn and a dopey but mean-spirited nature. And how? As it isn't even a competition. This is a good lesson that even the biggest, toughest seeming bullies can be outmatched by someone proficient at dealing violence who just doesn't give a squirt who their opposition happens to be. Even when the coach comes to the rescue with his best Hawkeye impression.
Alright, freeze! Hold it right there! You make one more move toward that girl, I swear I'm gonna hang your head on my wall!
Killer isn't having it, snatching the arrow right out of the air. Before giving the coach back his arrow. Between decimating Wildman, busting through the door to claim Radish, and catching the arrow, the dude has that provoked, unstoppable quality exemplified by much bigger name slashers. So where does the killer's motive get revealed? Courtney and her roommate Janet are talking about sororities, and we learn Courtney's aversion to them also springs from an unfortunate young woman's death.
But last year a girl killed herself because the sorority wouldn't accept her.
How awful.
She jumped from the top of McWilliams Tower, 6 floors.
In what I believe to be the tower where she was studying at the beginning of the film and where the finale plays out. I think this clip subtly reveals the why of the killer. I believe he was in some way connected to the young woman referenced. Maybe he's her older brother or her uncle or maybe even her father. I don't want to think he was the much older guy who groomed her into a huge age gap relationship, but that's a possibility too. It's as if he snapped and worked his way to the source of his frustration, angst, and infuriation. Because that's the thing. The killer seems highly volatile, as if driven by intense anger. Psychos can be psychos for no other reason than that. But this guy's actions make it hard to not regard him as motivated in a bigger way than simple psychopathy would provide. If there is something personal to his murder spree, it explains his determination. Perhaps this means his targets are in some regard not so random after all, as many of his victims represent the worst types college has to offer. Perhaps those he assumes are the types to participate in a young woman's ruination. When he goes after Courtney in the tower, and she grips a piece of wood and beats him off, that didn't sound right. Thrashes him with a chunk of lumber until he plummets, that's better. The fall relives the harrowing event that set him off. I believe when he began killing harmless nerds like Radish, it indicated he'd gone completely off the rails. Going with this reasoning, I conclude that Courtney was able to emerge as the survivor girl because she was in some way a surrogate of the killer's lost relative, only with a better sense of identity, and by trying to kill her, he vaulted beyond whatever his initial quest for vengeance entailed, and became no better than the ills he sought to stamp out. Perhaps having become so caught up in bloodlust he just couldn't stop himself. Pursuing Courtney to a place where she was able to get the upper hand wasn't a sign of self-defeating hubris, as it might appear, but insanity. In the end, the killer was little different than Cujo, forcing Courtney to put him down like a rabid dog. But then...
Fine, how do you do? We've just been informed that a novelization of this film exists that could throw a monkey wrench into this theory and gum up the whole works. Does the book shed more light on the killer? If so, is it contradictory to the theory presented herein? And most importantly, by watching this video, was your time completely wasted by my ne'er-do-well husband? Stay tuned for more on these and other queries right now.
Well, I'm a little taken aback and find it remarkable that a novelization, Final Exam, written by Jeffrey Meyer, was published in 1981.
I don't have time for these shenanigans.
I mean, you expect novelizations from the tentpole properties like Halloween and Friday the 13th, but a little regional slasher like Final Exam?
Who knows?
I've read maybe thousands of novels in the course of my life of all quality, length, and stripe. So of course I assumed this novel was going to be deep and incisive and blow my theory out of the water and make a fool of me. To which I say I do a pretty good job of making a fool of myself all on my own. Case in point, my assumption the novel would be a stake through my heart. It's actually quite amusing. Courtney views many of the other characters as bigger idiots than I do, and Radish is so intelligent he knows more about true crime than his major, and more about his major than his professors. The novel reveals the name of the tower where Courtney was studying and where the finale plays out as Harkness Tower, which is a seeming contradiction, only the lines I gleaned from the film for the theory don't exist in the book. Honestly, the novel isn't as representative of the film as you might assume, likely due to being based on an earlier draft of the script or personal flourishes by the author. But here's what you really want to know. Does it say anything about the killer that negates this theory? The novel reveals little about the killer other than he's a traveling loner with a short memory, possibly a former collegiate football star with an inclination for stalking women, and who has trouble sleeping, none of which I feel counters nor bolsters my theory. So disaster averted. If anything, it reinforces my stance, or at least doesn't drop a deuce on it. Either way, I stand by my assertion the killer was driven by a desire for personal revenge carried out on strangers over the death of someone close to him. Or maybe none of that's the case and Final Exam's just a slasher flick that left it simple because sometimes, well, oftentimes, that's scarier than giving a bunch of explanation. Just look at the Thorn continuity in the Halloween franchise. And the killer's like a great white shark feeding an appetite for death and destruction and nothing more. Strangely, there is a sage bit of wisdom in this film.
Once you get out of school, nobody cares what your grades were.
Because it truly is whom you know, not what you know, that usually gets you ahead. And grades mean a big eggplant in the real world.
The important thing to know is how to get what you want.
I think this young lady is way wiser than one might assume at first blush.
That's what'll help you later on, not grades.
Well, I've pulled and stretched the taffy about as much as I dare before all elasticity gives out. If you've made it this far, thanks for humoring my ramblings. Please share any refutations, opinions, accusations, japes, or other ideas in the comments below.
I got a present for you.
Your present may need some assembly.
And if it pleases you, join me next time, when I head back to weird territory and get into the Yuletide spirit, by discussing the 1984 holiday classic, the controversial tale of a spree killer set off by a series of Christmas-related traumas, Silent Night, Deadly Night.
I'm perfectly willing to be bought if the price is right.
Bye now.
And if they observe any cheating, they have been instructed to alert a highly skilled sniper. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That I've placed in McWilliams Tower.